All right, good morning everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Managing Cover Crops for Water Quality and Cash Crop Success. My name is Krista Korleski, and I'm the team member at the Partnership for Ag Resource Management, who is hosting the webinar this morning. We're joined today by my colleague, Dr. Thomas Green, President and co-founder of the IPM Institute, who will provide a brief introduction. I'm also pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Dean Baas. Dean is a senior research associate at Michigan State University Extension. Dean is a member of the Midwest Cover Crops Council Executive Committee and coordinates MCCC activities, including the promotion of cover crop usage in the Midwest and the development of tools to assist farmers in cover crop decision-making. Dean has a PhD in environmental geosciences and biosystems and agricultural engineering and a BS in agricultural engineering from MSU. Dean will present and describe ways to incorporate different varieties of cover crops onto fields. He will also demonstrate some of the available online cover crop decision-making tools. We will then have at least 15 minutes for Q&A. Before we begin, I wanted to share some brief logistics. You will remain muted as an audience member during the presentations, but please make use of the question box on your screen to type questions. I will moderate the questions at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available later on partnershipfarm.org. By attending the webinar today, you will be eligible for 1.0 CCA continuing education units. There is a half point for crop management and a half point for soil and water management. You must be present for the entire 1-hour webinar to receive those points. If you are watching this webinar live, you will receive an email by the end of the day with links to submit survey evaluations and submit your CCA credentials to earn points. If you are watching it on demand, you are provided instructions at the end of this presentation to submit your credentials. Now I will turn it over to Dr. Thomas Green, President of the IPM Institute.
Thanks, Krista. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Partnership for Ag Resource Management is an effort of the nonprofit IPM Institute, along with a host of other projects in agriculture and in communities, each focused on using the power of the marketplace to improve sustainability. We're a team of 18 currently working to increase adoption of best practices and improve outcomes in health, environment, and economics, all key elements of sustainability. You may have read one or more of our series of IPM articles in Crops and Soils magazine, including the one in the current issue. We work with pest control companies, hospitals, schools, and other facilities and communities, and with farmers and food companies around the world to improve practices and communicate those benefits to buyers and the public. Our goal with the Partnership for Ag Resource Management is to identify revenue opportunities for ag retailers that help keep our valuable ag resources on cropland, help to promote those products and services, and then track and report sales and estimated reductions in losses of nutrients and other inputs. Next slide. We face a real challenge in the Great Lakes, Mississippi River, Chesapeake Bay, and other watersheds. Nutrients and soil resources we need for our crops are leaving cropland and ending up in our rivers, lakes, and streams. The photos on the right show what happens when too much phosphorus gets into the water, feeding algal blooms which close beaches to swimming, make fishing a challenge, and have also shut down public water supplies. The graph in the lower left of NOAA data shows trends in blooms since 2002. After phosphorus loadings declined sharply in the mid-'80s with the advent of reduced tillage, they've increased, and as a result, we've experienced more frequent and severe algal blooms. 2015, not shown here, was a record and exceeded the prior 2011 record. There are multiple sources of phosphorus, but we know that the phosphorus is coming primarily from cropland because of the timing of the loads. They spike during snowmelt and rain events in winter and early spring following fall application. The increase has been in dissolved phosphorus rather than phosphorus attached to soil particles, and along with that increase, Heidelberg University and others have documented a concentration of phosphorus in the top layer of soil, where years of surface applications and rotational no-till systems have resulted in saturation of the soil with phosphorus and an inability to hold more. As a consequence, we see the increased runoff plus movement down through macropores into and out of tile drain systems. Ag retailers, next slide, Kristen, have valuable products and services which can keep phosphorus on cropland and out of waterways. Here's a list of some of those, along with some very rough average reductions based on published studies. There's lots of variability in the published numbers based on soil type, slope, proximity to surface water, and other factors, but these rough averages give us a sense of where we can likely make a difference. So cover crops, soil testing, grid or zone sampling, and variable rate application, and custom application are revenue generating opportunities for ag retailers that reduce phosphorus losses. We can also let farmers know when a broadcast application has been made so they can get out and get the application covered, avoid application before heavy rain events, abide by setbacks, and let farmers know when we see an issue that needs attention, like a tile drain blowout. Applying enough phosphorus for the following crop only rather than for the next several crops in the rotation could also make a difference. And ag retailers are making a difference. For example, our annual survey shows big increases in variable rate phosphorus application where ag retailers have worked together with us to promote those. We need to track and report those improvements that we're making so that regulators and the public are aware of these voluntary efforts, using the power of the marketplace to drive improvements. Last year, we secured funding for ag retailers to offer a discount on variable rate to farmers in the Sandusky River watershed who had not used it before. We had 13 ag retailers and 95 growers participate. This year, we're expanding to 3 additional watersheds in northwestern Ohio this year. So you'll hear from Krista more about some additional tools and resources that we have for ag retailers to use as we work to achieve our goals. And with that, I'll turn it back to Krista.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So as Tom mentioned, we do have some free resources available on our website, partnershipfarm.org. On the left, you can see the front page of our agronomist handbook that is available for download. And on the right, you can see the front and back of our phosphorus loss reduction wallet card that you can order for free on our website. All right, and let's see, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dean Baas, the Senior Research Associate at Michigan State University Extension. All right, Dean. It's all yours.
Okay. I'm trying to show my screen. You don't see it yet, do you?
Yep, I do see your screen. If you just pull up the PowerPoint, I think. All right.
Okay, do you see?
Yep. I see
Full
it.
presentation?
Yep.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. I've been asked to talk about managing cover crops for water quality and cash crop successes. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but, you know, the major water quality issues that have faced agriculture really, you know, a lot of it started with the hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of discussion about that, particularly Mississippi River Basin. You've got the Chesapeake Bay in where they estimate that 30% of the nitrogen pollution is coming from agriculture. lot of programs in the Chesapeake Bay looking at reducing agricultural impact. There was a little bit of talk about the Western Lake Erie Basin and the issues going on there. That's kind of had a spotlight on it since last year. That chart up in the right corner there, you can see the phosphorus loading in 2015, and they actually have on the website now where they're tracking this thing, you know, every week. You see that red bar is where we're at so far as of June 6th. So these types of things are being watched really closely. You have groups out there that are really needing to pounce. I've seen stuff out there where they claim, like particularly for like the Maumee River and some of those watersheds, that they're blaming agriculture for 80% of the phosphorus that's coming into those. So there's a spotlight on some of these watersheds in particular. And then you're probably all aware of the Des Moines issue, where the water district in Des Moines is suing 3 county drainage districts and saying that they aren't doing enough to keep nitrogen out of the water. So these things are around the country, and I think it's something that definitely everybody has to keep top of mind as we do our business and as we represent agriculture, that these things are part of our plans and our management strategies. Agriculture's under continued pressure to reduce its impact on water quality, and you know, we got to be honest that, you know, climate change is adding to the problem. I don't want to get into a discussion as to what the cause is, but we have seen changes in climate. I've got a little chart up there for the Great Lakes region because that's what I'm closest to. And when you look at the arrows there, the big ones that stand out is the total precipitation is up 11%, but the bigger issue is that 37% increase in heavy storm precipitation. And what we're getting is the precipitation is occurring in larger and larger events. It's not unheard of to get a 100-year storm almost every year for the last few years. And the issue we have is keeping that water on the landscape. How do we keep it from running off? How do we keep it from taking the nutrients with it? And so that comes into play, and as we look at practices that can be implemented, a lot of them now take into consideration those extreme events. When you look at what's being done in Ohio with nutrient management and having to check weather forecasts before you can apply nutrients, and having that documented that you've done those types of things, it's all coming into play. So why is this such a difficult problem? You know, we just need to manage fertilizer better, right? Well, if you look at the system, and this is the chart for nitrogen, but you know, it's basically a leaky system. You have, in the case of nitrogen, you have a lot of nitrogen that's bound up in the soil organic matter. The microbial production of nitrate, you know, comes from that native soil. That can be anywhere from 100 to 400 pounds of N per year. Some of that's recycled back, but you have nitrate leaching to the water. You've got the removal of roughly probably 165 pounds per acre, but only 100 pounds of that goes with the grain harvest. You got another 65 pounds returned in the residue. Then we're adding 150 pounds. Then you've got the loss through gases, nitrous oxide emissions, those types of things. It's not a nice, tight system with, you know, nice contained boundaries all around it. Then if you lay on top of that, when corn or soybeans are taking up nitrogen, the period of peak productivity from the native soil organic matter peaks before the crop needs the uptake. So when you look at the periods, the shaded areas here, the soil produces nitrate, but there's no crop to use it. And so these are periods where there is the loss of nitrate to waterways. And you can kind of lay phosphorus on top of this too. Those are the same periods where you would have potential for the loss of phosphorus as well. So what we like to take a look at here is, you know, what can we do in those dark gray areas? How can we help reduce the losses in those areas? And really, cover crops are a way to do that. If you look at the flow paths, you know, with a naturally well-drained soil, you can see you've got more infiltration, and you see that deep percolation is 2 arrows, meaning that that's a greater flow path down through the well-drained soils. On the soils that are poor, have poor drainage, they tend to be tiled, and so you short-circuit that path with your subsurface drainage with your tile lines. And both systems have the potential for surface runoff, particularly, again, as we talk about the increase in the more severity of the events. If the soils can't handle that flow, it's going to come off in surface runoff. So anything we can do to increase the ability of the soils to take up those rainfall events and keep it in the soil is going to be to our advantage, not only for retaining the water for growing the crop, but also as far as retaining the nutrients. So can cover crops help? I thought I would use some information from Iowa. This is work done by Casper. They've done a lot of work over extended period of time looking at cover crops. And this chart is from Casper's group, and it shows in a tile drainage type situation the impact of cover crops on tile drainage flow. You can see in most cases there is less flow out of the tile drain with the rye cover crop compared to no cover crop, and on average it's lower. You have a couple of years here where they're pretty close, like 2008. It actually looks like the rye cover crop might have had slightly more, but in general, from a precipitation standpoint, you do have a little better holding capacity with the cover crop. But I think the big learning on this is what is going on with the nitrate concentration in that tile drainage flow. You can see with a rye cover crop compared to no cover crop on the annual nitrate concentration in the flow that it's a substantial reduction with the rye cover crop. They totaled up things over the 14-year period, and so this is corn, soybean, no-till. The nitrate loss to drainage was 408 pounds per acre over the 14-year period. With no-till with the rye cover crop, it was 211, so that's a reduction of 275 pounds per acre, or over 50% reduction by putting the cover crop in. If you look at it on average, that's 35 pounds per acre loss per year, and that was reduced to 15 pounds for a savings of 20 pounds per acre. So we know cover crops can help retain the nutrients, but what are farmers currently saying about cover crops? And I apologize, that's supposed to be SARE 2013 to 2014. I didn't get that corrected on this slide. But this is data that comes out of the SARE cover crop survey that was done. And one of the things we've seen recently that I find quite interesting is that if you ask cover crop users, what's their #1 desired benefit from using a cover crop, increasing soil organic matter is now the #1 desired benefit at close to 74%. Reduces soil erosion is now second at 51%. And it's not that long ago that soil erosion was always the #1 and was in that kind of 70 to 80% range of respondents saying the #1 reason for using a cover crop is to reduce soil erosion. And now that has changed. And I don't really have any data on it, but I believe a lot of that is due to the NRCS Soil Health Initiative that's out there. I think the pushing of soil health has put cover crops into a new context for a lot of farmers, and they're now looking at cover crops as a way to increase soil organic matter. In the end, you don't just get one benefit out of cover crops. So when even though reducing soil erosion is now further down the list, if the goal is to increase soil organic matter, you're still going to be reducing soil erosion, and you're also going to be helping your system work better so that your nutrients are used more efficiently and not lost as easily. But I think what this points out is that we may need to kind of go back and remind farmers that that there are water quality benefits such as reducing erosion, and not to that with the multiple benefits of cover crops, think about all the things you can do with cover crops in addition to increasing soil organic matter, reducing soil erosion, and reducing compaction. You get multiple benefits, and I think sometimes we need to remind people that it's not just one benefit that you get out of a cover crop. Those same farmers that are surveyed, they reported that their average yields with and without cover crops by state, and for the most part, most of the farmers reported that their average corn yields were higher with cover crops. Now, this isn't necessarily statistically significant data, but farmers are reporting when they use cover crops compared to their no cover crop fields that they're seeing an increase in yields, and that's really what we're after. The ultimate benefit from using a cover crop is we'd like to see an increase in yields and an increase in profits. Same thing with soybeans. Soybean yields were reported higher, and in some cases, almost an increase of 10 bushels per acre, like in the case of Michigan, going up from 35.3 to 44.8. Some of the reported yield increases are quite substantial. So this is what we like to call the benefit chart for cover crops and all the things that they can affect, soil organic matter, erosion control, disease, nematodes, and how things circle back and like that. I'd like to suggest that the majority of farmers recognize the benefits that cover crops bring to soil health and to the system. I think we've been preaching that for a lot of years, and most people have, I like to say, drank the Kool-Aid on that one. But I think where farmers are currently at is they're looking for assistance on how to use cover crops. I think they see the benefits, but how can they fit them into their system? What works best? And I think that's where we've kind of fallen a little bit behind in a lot of cases where we're focusing our efforts on doing our research and a lot of the work going forward, I think, is to look at how to make cover crops work in different systems, what cover crops work, when should they be planted, what are alternative planting methods. I think that's the direction that we're going and that we need to go in the future. We need to continue to quantify the effects on water quality and soil health and things like that, but when it comes to the real need for assistance, I think it's on how to make cover crops work. I'm going to jump a little bit into soil health here and get on, just give you some food for thought. I would like to propose that the genetic and chemical improvements that we've seen through the years have actually masked the decline in soil health. You know, we continue to see yields improve each year, and you know, a lot of times if the yield's going up, you really don't take a look at what's really going on with the soils, but we've looked at the soil organic matter on a lot of ag production land, and it is declining. And I'd like to propose that genetics may soon surpass the soil's capacity to support the improvements. I don't know when that's going to happen, and I'll be honest, this is kind of my opinion, but I think there's indications that yields may plateau, even though the genetics will produce higher yields. Our ability to do it with soils with declining soil organic matter may prevent that from happening. And we are all familiar with, you know, some of the corn yields that are reported each year in some of the contests and things like that. You know the capability of some of these corn hybrids and with the genetic improvements and things like that, and you can't get anywhere close to that on your farm or on the farms you work with, and that's probably due to the soils and the types of soils you have. So I think soil health and soil organic matter, part of that is going to be remaining competitive. And you know, but yields are going up, you know, do I really have to be concerned right now? Well, at the end of the day, particularly if you're looking at using cover crops, building soil organic matter with cover crops is a slow process under production conditions. About the best you're going to do is 1/10 to 0.15% per year. So that says it's going to take 6.5 to 10 years to increase your soil organic matter by 1%. So if you believe your soil will limit you in the future, even if it's not limiting you right now, but if you believe it will limit you in the future, now's the time to get started if you want to turn around the decline in soil organic matter and start building that back up. So that's just a little tangent, but I like to throw that out as food for thought as another reason why we need to consider cover crops. So I go back, you know, back on farmers need assistance. On that same cover crop survey, we asked, or Sarah asked farmers what are your biggest challenges? And time and labor required for planting and the increased management is the #1 issue. Let's face it, when it comes to doing cover crops after corn or soybean harvest, that is the busiest, worst, and most unpredictable time of year to be doing cover crops. There was some survey work that I did for a project with farmers, and I always chuckled. There was one comment was written by a farmer, and he said, okay, so what do you really want me to do? Do you want me to plant cover crops, or do you want me to finish harvesting? And that's really the situation that a lot of farmers face, is that timing is a big issue. And then on top of that, if you get delayed on your harvest, now you're planting late, then establishing cover crops becomes a problem because it gets late in the year, you don't get as good establishment. So I really think these are some of the areas where we need to focus our efforts on looking at ways to plant cover crops earlier, interseeding of cover crops. What do we need to do to make aerial seeding more reliable? Maybe high boy seeding. Some of those types of methods that will move getting cover crops earlier when it's less busy and there's less demands on farmer time and machinery time. This is what the non-cover crop users said. Basically, it had pretty much the same top issue, was time and labor required for planting cover crops and managing cover crops. One of the things we found is the people who are successful with cover crops, it's not am I going to use a cover crop or not? They plan it into their system. It's part of their system. They're going to get the cover crops in. It's not something that they make the call on in the fall. I can remember a couple of years ago I was at a breakfast with one of my farmers that used cover crops, and it was like right around, it was in late December, and I said, Larry, did you get your cover crops in? He goes, yeah, I was planting them on Thanksgiving, but I got them in. In his case, it wasn't whether he was going to put them in or not. He did. He put them in as part of his system. This is a survey that I did, that a team of us did from the Midwest Cover Crop Council for the North Central Soybean Research Program, and we asked CCAs and agronomists, how often do you advise farmers to grow cover crops? And this was actually pretty disappointing. If you add up always and frequently, you're lucky to get to 25%. And about 75% of CCA and agronomists only sometimes or never advise farmers to grow cover crops. And I think this is an area where there's an opportunity for some additional programs and education. And I'm going to talk some about kind of how to minimize that risk. And to be honest, I don't blame the ag retailers for not doing it, because you have risks unique to your businesses. You don't want to be responsible for termination problems. We've all heard about the annual ryegrass that didn't get killed. And, delays in planting because you got a cover crop in there, you can't get in and spray the cover crop. And reduced yields that might or might not be blamed on the fact that a cover crop was recommended. And I'm sure there's a whole lot more. There are business implications associated with recommending a practice like that to your farmers. And so I'd like to take a little bit of time and talk about maybe how to manage those risks. And it really comes down to managing expectations. You need to have discussions with the farmers. You need to talk about the benefits, but you also have to be honest about the risks. And you need to plan early. You have to kind of take a systems approach as to where they will work well, how they will fit into the system, and probably most importantly, you got to have a contingency plan. You got to talk about what you're going to do if some of the potential problems arise due to the type of spraying, the type of climate changes that we see coming up these days. You need to agree ahead of time that the benefits outweigh the risk, and I think there has to be the discussion that the risk is being shared, that you understand that there's risks, and if the situation pops up, it's just not the ag retailer's fault that it happened, that the farmer feels that the benefits are worth taking those risks and shares in those risks. If termination is a concern, that's the one that tends to get people the worst, is that there's a problems with spring termination, and that can cause all kinds of problems. Start out with a winter kill cover crop. That way you don't have to worry about dealing with it in the spring. We've got data that shows that there's still benefits from only having a cover crop in the fall. It still reduces winter annual weeds. It gives you about half the biomass, but that's better than nothing. So you can start there. If you are doing spring termination, if you're terminating with herbicides, diligently follow best spray practices. Particularly when it comes to annual ryegrass, you gotta spray it at the right time. Gotta make sure that the herbicide translocates, because if you don't get that annual ryegrass killed, it can potentially cause problems. If you're using cereal grains like cereal rye, terminate it at least 10 days prior to planting corn. We recommend that because there are documented cases of a yield hit that comes if you plant corn too soon after or right after terminating, say, cereal rye. We still don't know the cause of it, and so we basically, it doesn't always happen, but when it does happen, it can be severe. So just to eliminate the possibility of that happening, terminate cereal rye at least 10 days, even 2 weeks prior to planting corn. And then terminate it at a maximum growth of about 12 to 18 inches. Otherwise, it starts getting too mature and you get nitrogen tie-up. So there's just some, really basic things that that you can follow that will increase your success with when using cover crops. What you see in the fall may not reflect what you see in the spring. I like to say don't give up. This is a picture of, this was cereal rye was aerial seeded into soybeans, standing soybeans, and the picture on the left was taken November 14th. It was seeded on July 18th. Both of them were seeded on both pictures July 18th, but the picture on the left was taken in November. And I dug all through that field, and I thought we totally wasted our money on aerial seeding. Could not find any cereal rye growing in that field. What you see on the right is what it looked like in May the following spring. So if you don't see it in the spring, don't give up on it, particularly with the cereal grains. They can get established when you think they aren't, and you'll get benefit in the spring. If you're getting new into cover crops, or you have farmers who are getting in, don't put the whole farm in cover crops. Start small. A lot of times I tell people, plant one field that has problems, and because if you've got something you're trying to solve with cover crops, that gives you even more motivation. If you have a field that has erosion problems, that you're concerned about nutrient losses, that's a good one to say, hey, let's put it on there. Let's see if we can get some control. If you've got a field that's low soil organic matter, you want to build that, that's a good one. You got to have a long-term perspective. It may take, at least 3 years to really see some obvious effects. So you got to have a long-term perspective on it. And I'll get on one of my soapboxes here, particularly when you're experimenting with the cover crops and trying them for the first time. Leave yourself a control plot within the field so that you have a no-cover comparison. I'll be the first to tell you that cover crops are getting credit for things they're probably not delivering, and they're also getting blamed for things that they probably shouldn't be blamed for. And a lot of times that's because the comparisons that are being done out there are between one field with cover crops to another field that doesn't have cover crops, but the fields have a different rotation history, maybe different soil types, and it's really not a valid comparison. If nothing else, leave yourself one strip that you can harvest separately, so you can stand there at the end of the field and take a look at it and say, is it greener, is it taller, is it shorter, is it further along, so you can really have a comparison. And then if you can harvest that strip separately, at least get a feel for whether you're getting a benefit from yield in that same field. Finally on, managing the risks, study cover crops. There's a lot of information out there. Enlist the help of cover crop experts. The people who are using cover crops on a regular basis are more than happy to give advice. A lot of them have gone through a learning process and would just as soon help you avoid some of the bad experiences that they had in the past. So most cover crop farmers that use cover crop experts are more than happy to help. You're going to have to do some experimenting on your own. Every system is different crop rotations, different tillage methods, different methods of applying nutrients. All those things vary from farm to farm. I have a little bit of a burn on because I constantly get the question of, tell me what the economics of cover crops are. Give me a recipe for it and tell me what I'm going to save from it. And it depends on the system, it depends on the crops in rotation, it depends on the climate, and I maintain at this point in the year, I probably could not get a firm answer out of any of you as to how well you're going to do with your cash crops this year. If I asked you, how much are you going to make on the cash crop this year, you're going to go, well, it depends on the weather, it depends on crop prices. You can probably pretty easily come up with what the investment this year is, and I can pretty easily come up with what the investment in a cover crop is going to be, but I can't any easier predict the payback you're going to get year to year from a cover crop than you can predict the payback you're going to get year to year from cash crop, because they're all similar type systems, and it depends on the individual systems, how things are managed, and it's just something that you're going to have to experiment with and start learning. Many farms have evolved their cash crop systems through the years. They're not doing that the way they did years ago either, and you have to go through the same type of learning process with cover crops. As far as the ag retailers, partner with your farmers to do some experiments. Say, hey, can we take some of your land and can we put some cover crops in and evaluate them? Get them involved in the process. I think that all helps in coming to an understanding of what's best for cover crops in a certain area and on certain types of farms. And use the many available cover crop resources. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown of some of those available resources. I'll start with this, though. I find this pretty revealing. This is the Google searches for the term cover crop. And if you look at this sawtooth pattern, all of these peaks are in the fall of the year. And that's not good. We shouldn't be looking for cover crops and cover crop information in the fall of the year. We need to move that peak either to the winter or early spring so that cover crops are being planned as part of the system and integrated into what's going to go on that year. Seed can be purchased in an early and cost-effective manner, all those types of things. We've got to get this chart so these are not happening in the fall of the year. So I'm part of the Midwest Cover Crop Council, and the Midwest Cover Crop Council is a regional network of diverse cover crop resources. We pretty much have isolated our region of that we will operate in as the North Central region, the 12 states of the North Central region plus Ontario. I'll put in a plug for my Ontario partners right now. They do a lot of great work on cover crops in Ontario, and they put out a lot of good publications. When you're searching for information on cover crops and production, don't forget to take a look at the stuff that the Ontario folks are putting out. We're a loose collaboration. The people that are part of the Midwest Cover Crop Council don't actually work for the Midwest Cover Crop Council. We all have a common interest. It's all to our advantage in having the network, and so it's not a very formal organization. We just recently became housed at Purdue University. Is going to be the home for the Midwest Cover Crop Council, so we finally have a home for it. It's mostly a volunteer organization. We are hiring a program manager who will actually work specifically for the Midwest Cover Crop Council. Group researches and consolidates and distributes cover crop information through its members, website, listserv, meetings, and products. It's a diverse group. It's a great group to work with, to be part of, just because it's made up of people from all different aspects of agriculture. It's not focused on one particular group. So you get a good, diverse perspective and a lot of expertise through that. What we have to offer is a website. There's an online cover crop decision tool. There's the Midwest Cover Crop Field Guide, and we have an annual meeting each year. You have access to cover crop experts through the listserv and access for collaboration on research, education, and extension. Quick rundown on the products. We have a website, shows some of the stats on that through November of last year. I haven't had a chance to update these recently, but since the inception there have been almost 500,000 page views. All 50 states have visited. Basically, Midwestern states are the ones that visit it the most. We have a web-based decision tool, which allows you to put in your county, state and county, and what you're interested in getting as benefits, some information about drainage, and it'll help you screen what cover crops might work the best and what the planting dates for those cover crops in your county would be. We have a listserv. The listserv is up to 544 subscribers. I recommend that everybody go to the website and sign up for the listserv. You will not get junk email, and it's a great forum for cover crops and cover crop information. Anyone can ask a question of the listserv, and I'm always amazed when someone asks a question about a cover crop or a cover crop issue. They usually get a response within an hour or two, which is followed by additional responses as well. So if you haven't signed up for the Midwest Cover Crop Council listserv, please do. Facebook likes have increased from 341 to 1,023, which I think is a good sign on trend. We have the Midwest Cover Crop Council Field Guide available as a resource, and that's available from the education store, it's printed at Purdue. You can see some of the stats. We initially printed 15,000 copies and no 5,000 copies and thought that would be hard to get rid of. We're now probably, as of now, over 60,000 copies of this have been distributed. I tell everybody you need 2 of them. You need one for the glove box of your pickup and one for behind the toilet, the 2 places that you do most of your thinking. So if you haven't got one, you may want to get a Midwest Cover Crop Council Field Guide. We do have annual meetings where we bring the group together and talk about cover crops, cover crop research, do presentations, farmer panels. I invite everybody to come to the meeting that's coming up in 2017 on March 14th and 15th because we will be hosting it in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So save the date, get it on your calendar. The other resource that a lot of people use is Managing Cover Crops Profitably. It's a SARE publication. You can order it off of the SARE website if you want the book. It's also available as a PDF for free. You can download it and have all the information. So thank you for your time, and I will turn it back over to Krista.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Dean. We now have some time for questions and answers, so please enter your questions into the question box on your screen. And it looks like we've already got some coming in. So first question for you, Dean, is when is the nitrogen from cover crops available to the cash crop?
Oh, yeah, that's one of those questions that you know, I wish we had the data for. It depends on the maturity of the cover crop, particularly when you look at nitrogen scavenging type cover crops like cereal rye and grasses and things like that. Maturity can impact it. I really recommend, particularly in a corn system, that you use like a pre-side dress nitrogen test to see what you've got and to make those kind of decisions. There's just not a good, reliable model for how the nitrogen is released from the different cover crops in the different types of soil types, you know, based on something that any of us have confidence saying you can use to make that kind of a decision. Really, at the end of the day, soil testing is probably the best way to make that decision. We do know it does take up nitrogen during the period where it's susceptible to loss, but the timing of the release is still something that we need a lot more research on. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Next question. Do cover crops add to the bioaccumulation of P at or near the soil surface? Would accumulation of P at or near the soil surface add to losses of DRP from cropland?
There's not a tremendous amount of research on cover crops and phosphorus. If you're in the situation where you have a lot of excess phosphorus in the soil, if you think about the system with cover crops, they will probably take some nitrogen up and prevent it from being lost, and hopefully release it back into the system where it can be used by the cash crop. But in the situations where you have a lot of extra nitrogen, the cover crops being returned to the soil, so you're basically kind of recycling that phosphorus, that large phosphorus pool. Since you're not removing the cover crop, it just becomes part of that excess pool, and it's really your cash crop that is removing the phosphorus. The cover crop is hopefully going to keep the particulate phosphorus in place But one of the things that I like to point out to people is, since we've gone to a lot of the conservation practices with no-till cover crops, buffer strips, filter strips, we basically, when Mother Nature was using the sediment as the way to get rid of the phosphorus in the past, we are now keeping the phosphorus in place. And if there's too much phosphorus, Mother Nature will figure out a way to get rid of it. So if we continue to add to that phosphorus pool and keep all that phosphorus on the land, the next mechanism for removing that phosphorus through nature is to dissolve it and then take an underground flow path to get it out of the system. So I think there's a ways to go on cover crops and managing dissolved phosphorus. We know it can be a tremendous help for phosphorus, but as we've seen in Lake Erie and some of these watersheds, that even though the total phosphorus, because of the particular amount, went down considerably, now we're starting to see the dissolved phosphorus creep back up, and that's because some of these other systems are coming into play. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's
okay.
That's another area that we definitely need to look at dissolved phosphorus and cover crops.
Okay. All right. Next question. What are your thoughts on diversity in cover crops? How many are too many, and which ones work well together?
A lot. We get this question a lot because there are a lot of people pushing mixes out there, and I've seen mixes with 11, 14 cover crops in them. I believe when it comes to mixes, I don't see a big advantage in going past about 2 or 3, maybe 4 different cover crops. I like the diversity that it can bring to the system. I like getting a legume and a brassica and a grass all in combination to bring some plant diversity to the system. What people feel as far as those much larger mixes is basically, in a lot of ways, it's an insurance policy. They have so many different types of plants in there that, dependent on the type of year you're having, as far as heat and precipitation, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 of them that will do really well, and the rest of them might not do so hot, and in a different type of year, a different 3 or 4. But you pay a lot for that insurance. I think in our systems, a 2-3-way mix can usually deliver what you're looking for, and going much past that, I guess I haven't seen the benefit of it, but I don't have the data to back up that statement. And I think a lot of it purely comes from a cost-effectiveness standpoint. It gets pretty expensive for those really complicated mixes.
Okay. All right, and let's do one more question. Is dissolved P, in contrast to soil-attached P, more active in any way to initiate an algal bloom?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the problem, is the dissolved phosphorus is actually in the form that the algae can use, where as long as the phosphorus is bound to, as particulate phosphorus, and stays bound to the soil, it's actually not usable in that form by the algae. Now, it will probably get buried in bottom sediments and in could eventually come back into the system later as dissolved phosphorus as conditions changed. But the form of the phosphorus that is of more concern is the dissolved phosphorus, because algae can use that just as it is. And so a small amount of dissolved phosphorus can actually, from an immediate standpoint, be more of a problem than a larger amount of particulate phosphorus.
Okay, great. So in the interest of time, I'd like to wrap up the Q&A, and I want to thank Dean Baas for joining us today. And I also want to recognize our participating ag retailers. We would like to recognize these retailers who have been participating in the project since 2011, and also thank the more than 30 additional retailers who participated in our survey this past winter. If you are an ag retailer in the Great Lakes Basin that is interested in participating in this partnership to benefit your business and water quality, please contact me. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge our funders and collaborators that made this webinar possible, in particular the support of the Great Lakes Protection Fund and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And a reminder to please look for the email later this afternoon with a webinar evaluation, webinar recording, and a link to submit your CCA credentials to earn the 1.0 CCA CEUs. And thank you for joining us today.